Hello and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast. I am your host, Fabrice and I, and joining me here in the Murrieta studios is Dr. David Burns. Hi, David.
Hi, Fabrice.
Dr. David Burns has been a pioneer in the development of cognitive therapy, and he is the creator of the new TEAM therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 20 languages. He is an emeritus adjunct clinical professor of psychiatry at the Stanford University School of Medicine. Welcome to episode 117 of the Feeling Good podcast. We are going to broadcast again, David, part 3 of the series of interviews you did with Stephanie James on her podcast, The Spark. The previous two were our episodes 92 and 111. And in this one, your main focus with Stephanie was intimate relationships. Is that right?
Yeah, the interpersonal team model.
Yes. What were the specific topics that you covered there?
I have no idea.
You have no idea.
I can't remember, but I do remember. It's always great working with Stephanie, and she said this third one, how to deal with conflicts in intimate relationships or with colleagues or friends or family members. She said it was her favorite of our 3 interviews. All 3 interviews were just fabulous, and this one was no exception. She's very bright, but she's also very warm. And she really gets it. And then she's dynamic and lively. So it's just great fun talking to her. And I think people will really enjoy listening to the podcast. The first one was on, the cognitive model. You feel the way you think. You can change the way you feel and take charge of your life. And that was just a sparkling podcast. And then the second one
Which is appropriate for a podcast called The Spark.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. And we want to say that she has a podcast called The Spark, and we'll link to it in the show notes, or you can find it, Google it, because you may find other interviews that she's done that you'll want to hear. Like she interviewed my colleague and your colleague and friend, Matthew May, Dr. Matthew May, who's like one of the world's top psychiatrists, in my opinion, also a team therapist, and he did a great interview with her.
I didn't know that she interviewed Matt.
Yeah, and his photos on her website and everything.
Oh, well, we should link to that episode as well.
Oh, yeah, great. Yeah, we'll do that. And then the second podcast I did with her was on the transition from TEAM-CBT, which was a huge breakthrough. Cognitive therapy came in the 50s and 60s and 70s is when it emerged. Yeah. And it was a revolution in psychotherapy. And now we've moved beyond CBT, although we keep all of the good stuff of CBT, but with TEAM, we now have all these powerful anti-resistance techniques. Yeah. And so we talked about that evolution in the second podcast. And then this third one, how do you work with people and yourself to deal with relationship conflicts? One of the most challenging topics in all of psychotherapy and in all of the world.
Yeah.
Not just psychotherapy, but a whole world is in conflict with everybody battling everyone, it seems, these days. And hatred seems to be on the rise, and love seems to be, kind of on the minimal side these days. So
well, hopefully not, but we'll see how things
evolve. Yeah. We'll keep our fingers crossed.
Okay, well, let's listen to this episode.
Well, one of the pieces I felt like that I wanted to ask you, because although we talk about all this wonderful theory and these techniques and tools, one of the things I've thought about is, on a personal level from you, David, what has driven you? Here we are, 35 years, almost 40 years later since Feeling Good, to continue, you just give so much. I think about the training group you do on Tuesday nights and these different components that you're involved in, the hiking group, still continuing to write and give back to the world. What's that inner drive about for you?
Narcissism and addiction.
Thank you.
I kind of like being the center of attention.
You're doing good.
My narcissism has been a benefit, but also a flaw that's caused problems for me, but it's also driven me hard, and I'm somewhat intelligent, but not super intelligent. And what I've discovered is that if I focus on a little small area, I can get really good at it. And then people think you're really smart when you just have this very specific skill. And I think I've had a pretty good aptitude for what we used to call cognitive therapy, and now we're calling TEAM-CBT or team therapy. And I'm also addicted to seeing people recover, like to seeing them recover right before your very eyes. And that happens to me most of the time when I have therapy sessions. As we've talked about, I meet with people for an hour and a half, or on hikes, there's no time limit really. But I work until the person's symptoms vanish. And I can't do that 100% of the time, but it happens, I would say, more than 90% of the time. And it just makes me euphoric. It's just like the most fun thing in the world. And I get to do it over and over again. And it just drives me on. And then I like the writing for me. For a while when I was in medical school, I used to write poetry as a pastime. And I would get friends to edit it and say, oh, I don't like this or this. And I had an endless appetite for that, because even if it's a short poem, to make it more and more beautiful. And there's the same with writing the new book. It's like when my wife tells me the awful parts of a chapter, then I can just lift them right out, and suddenly I've got something that it will really zing, and people will really be able to move through it and feel excited, and they won't get bogged down. And there's something about that process of creating in that way. I'm not a musician, but it's like being a musician to me. It's like you're creating something, and the process of creation excites me, and the process of doing therapy excites me. And then having colleagues like Jill Levitt, talking about the interpersonal thing we're supposed to talk about today. She and I did a live session with a fellow in England on a week ago.
I caught it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Was that the gentleman? I thought he was from Canada.
That was the podcast, the Facebook podcast on a Saturday.
Oh, okay. Yes,
We got on Jill's software.
Oh, okay.
And this fellow was in England, and he had a memory problem, and he wanted us to treat him. And again, he's a therapist. He works with the people with addictions. His name is Lee. And he graciously allowed us to treat him, and to use that as a series of, it'll be broken down into 3 podcasts, and then Fabrice will ask us questions about each section. But it was total blow away. And it just, that process is just, it's thrilling to me. It's thrilling to be doing therapy. It's thrilling to be seeing results. It's thrilling to be figuring out things about therapy, new techniques, new ways of conceptualizing things. I think that therapy, and I probably said there should be like a computer chip that keeps getting faster every week, more powerful, better tools, and I just love doing that. I'm just always doing what I want to do, and it's probably much the same with you. You probably work ridiculously long hours, but I don't think there's anyone telling you what to do all day long. It's a whole different thing, and just like being in a candy store and you have an endless appetite and an endless supply of candy, and so that's kind of how I experience my life. But I'm like anyone else, and there are always bumps in the roads and painful things that come up. I call it getting kicked in the stomach by life. For me, it happens about once every 3 years, or once every 10 years, or once every 5 years. Something happens that's just profoundly disturbing. I mean, we all have our little upsets to cope with every day, most of us. But at any rate, I'm just really grateful for the hand I've been dealt, and for the wonderful opportunities that I have. I'm grateful even for our little kitty, and we've probably talked about her, but Miss Misty. And just last night again, I woke up in the middle of the night, and she was sleeping up against my my feet. She doesn't trust enough to sleep against our chest yet. That's what we're working toward. But I reached down, started petting her, and she rolled over on her back and started purring. She stretched her arms and legs out. I was just purring her tummy, and it just doesn't get any better than that. My wife was saying maybe this is our Buddhist destiny. The highest calling is just to serve a cat, to make a cat or two happy.
You guys have become cat whisperers.
Yeah, my wife especially, she's taught me some of it, so I picked up some of it, and yeah, it's really a source of joy. Well, we better get on to troubled relationships.
Well, yes, we'll definitely talk about that. And I do want to talk about that. The one thing I wanted to comment on is, I hate to debunk your self-imposed idea of being a narcissist, but I think it takes a lot of humility to be able to, number one, handle critiques like you did with, exposing your poetry, your work, allowing other people to do that. And that was my experience when I was with you at Stanford. I think it takes, again, a lot of humility to be in that group and be open to feedback in the way that it's administered, if you will, in that group. And being willing to show up and be vulnerable. And for people that don't know about this group, it's a Tuesday night therapy training group that you do there at Stanford. And people are doing role plays and they're doing real life situations with each other and then being critiqued by their peers and by you and graded right there. Immediate feedback into how your therapeutic technique is working or not.
Yeah, and then if you check your ego at the door, it's just fun. The negative feedback is a way of learning, but if your ego gets in there, it's very humiliating. And we have quite a few who join the Tuesday group, and then once they see that they're going to have to be criticized, they can't take it, and they drop out. And it's kind of sad, but it does take a lot of courage. And then, as you saw, everyone gives us group leaders feedback. They criticize us and say, "Here's what I disliked about tonight's group. Here's what I liked, and here's how I rated you," and all these different dimensions. And it can be pretty painful because I don't know if was Jill Levitt there the night you were there, or
yes,
maybe not.
Yes,
oh, she was.
She
well,
was.
she's like an incredible, gracious genius, and she's so warm. Every time she opens her mouth and gives feedback, it just always done so diplomatically and beautifully. But I'm more aggressive, and so to me it doesn't sound aggressive. I'm just telling people, here's what you did right, here's what you did wrong, here's how you can improve. But I put it out there very directly, and sometimes people take umbrage, and I get a lot of criticism that's usually valid, and it's painful. But if you're willing to be open for it, it does give you a chance to grow, and that's what I like about teaching. Is I'm learning not only about what I'm teaching, but I'm learning about myself and my flaws, and every time I teach, it's like an opportunity to grow and to make magic happen, and to also experience the death of your ego when you get slammed for some mistake that you made. And I'm so talkative now that I get slammed a lot, to tell you the truth. And but it's those are always opportunities to accept yourself, to accept your humanness, and
it's a fantastic platform for being able to be present and to be, like you said, humble. And I don't have to be a perfectionist. There's no room for that there. And then I can receive this feedback, which really will help me grow. And that's the beauty of that experience, for sure.
Yeah. And then the thing about it that's especially neat, that us perfectionists have trouble grasping, is when you do show your humanness, with humility, people seem to embrace you like crazy, and it's just such a shock to some of us that we can be accepted and loved and respected by people, even with our flaws. In fact, I could tell you the first time I ever discovered that, if you want. This isn't what we're supposed to be talking about, but
we can talk. We got some time, so we can definitely talk about some other things here that are important.
But when I was a medical student at Stanford, I think I probably told you I never should have gone to medical school. I wasn't a pre-medical student. I didn't fit in at all. I was very anxious, and I cut most of my classes, and just barely made it through medical school. But I made up for it in internship and residency. I worked really hard and became a really good doctor. But I was kind of like a hippie. It was the late 1960s, and LSD was all over the place in Palo Alto, and it just seemed like there was more exciting things on the street than in the medical school. Statistics or biochemistry or cutting up a dead body and all of that stuff. Ken Kesey and his merry pranksters were around. He had an office. I had a little office in downtown Palo Alto. I rented it for $30 a month, and it was a little pad where I hung up. And Ken Kesey had his office right down the hall. It was an old dilapidated building. It was very colorful. He was the guy who wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh.
And, he's one of the people who made LSD. He was one of the first to take LSD, which was actually distributed by the CIA. Did you know that? You probably did.
I don't remember that, but wow. Yeah.
They got a hold of it, and they were testing it at the VA in Menlo Park. They thought it was going to be some important, drug to use in warfare, make prisoners talk. And they got people to volunteer to take it. And then Vic Lovell was one of them, and Ken Kesey was one of them. They said, oh, man, this LSD is better than anything. And they started getting Sandoz was the manufacturer, and they started, I guess, probably stealing it out of the supplies of the CIA or something, but it got distributed, and it was really a wild time. I was at the BN in San Francisco when that fellow from Harvard, Timothy Leary, said, tune in, turn on, and drop out.
Right.
And a lot of people were really doing that. Magic was in the air. At any rate, they had this thing in Palo Alto called the Mid-Peninsula Free University. And it was one of the many wonderful and kooky things that were going on. It was this university, and anyone could be a student, and anyone could teach. And there were no credits or rules of any kind. But they put out a brochure, every semester, and you could just list something. There was no buildings or anything. The classes met in people's houses. So if you wanted to have a class on, say, nude poetry reading, you put a little description, and then 12 people would show up at your house on Tuesday evenings and take their clothes off and read poetry or whatever it was that you wanted to do.
Awesome.
And there are hundreds of these things going on every week. And I remember Rob Christ was a friend of mine. He was the founder of this wonderful Mid-Peninsula Free University, and he had some afternoon encounter group at his house. It was very small. There were about 6 or 7 people, and we sat on the floor. And they started getting into this Gestalt thing. And some woman had a dream, and they had her acting out her dream, and it was very esoteric and bizarre and wonderful. Then all of a sudden, everybody turned on me, started confronting me and, putting me down and, pointing out all of my flaws. And it was just like having a pack of wild wolves eating you alive. And it was this horrible experience. And I felt humiliated and put down and anxious and ashamed.
What was the cause of that, David? What was the reason they turned against you? Was there something, I'm imagining, that happened?
That happens in these encounter groups, psychodrama groups. They sense your flaws, and then they start ripping into you to try to rip your defenses away. And there is a logic to it, but it can be very brutal. It's kind of no holds barred. Well, it was only a 3-hour thing, fortunately, so it came to an end. And all the other people, they got up and they were so happy. They were dancing around, and they went into the kitchen to they had some mushrooms, not psychedelic mushrooms, just ordinary mushrooms that they were going to put in a pan, and they were, cooking them there on a skillet with some butter or something. And they were all excited. And I just sat there feeling like a total loser. And then Rob Christ, who was, kind of the father figure of the whole thing, he came up to me and said, and that was in his home. He lived with a woman named Judy Cosgrove, who was really a neat person too. And he came up to me, he says, David, it looks like you're feeling kind of down right now. And I said, well, yeah, Rob, I just got ripped to shreds by these people. And I'm just feeling so ashamed and horrible and kind of deflated. And he says, well, David, I like you a whole lot more right now. Because he says, usually you're trying so hard to impress people and you come on too strong. And right now you're kind of showing your vulnerable side. And I feel really close to you. And I couldn't believe what he was saying. Here I was totally ripped to shreds and shown to be kind of an ass. And all of a sudden he was liking me. And he said he really liked me for the first time, felt close. I thought he'd always liked me. I thought I was impressing him or something, you know what I mean? And it was kind of a pleasant shock to the system. And it's a rule that I've been kind of learning over and over throughout my life. And it's kind of a neat discovery that you can be vulnerable and flawed and real and still have people love you and care about you and feel close to you. In fact, then I've subsequently come to see something I know that you're very aware of is that the flaws that we have is really our best side, because it's what connects us on a deep level to other people. It's not impressing people that get you close. It's seeing this deeper, more beautiful aspect of life. And the same thing that I've learned from our cats, that just they love me and as I am, and I love them, and they're not trying to impress anybody, and they're just incredibly grateful if you just give them a warm place to sleep at night, and you love them, and you give them food, and you treat them really, really well. They just love you incredibly.
Well, what a powerful, powerful moment that must have been for you. And I was listening to that and imagining myself in your place. And I would imagine that, if Chris would have come up to me, I would have said, you know what? I'm going to go join the nude poetry group.
Yeah.
I'm not coming back to Encounter Group again.
Yeah, right.
I have to deal with all of this.
There was plenty of that stuff by way of compensation. It was just the magic was in the air. I mean, it was, but magic is in the air now. I mean, what you're doing is magical, and you're starting your podcast, your new book, your lecture series, and people, I think, always have that potential for magic. People are like children. We forget and treat each other like adults, and then we get all, uptight all the time and working all the time. But people really want to play. That was, mm-hmm. They want to cry, they want to laugh, they want to be real. We never lose that strong desire. But that's what the 60s were all about, in part.
Yes.
Why I had so many mind-blowing experiences.
Well, thank you for sharing that experience with me. I want to really say, I just really honored that experience. I mean, even though I was just joking with you, I truly honor that experience, and then what that did in your life and how that's carried through for you.
Yeah. But enlightenment is something you have to work on all the time, because you slip in and out of enlightenment. But that's what the Buddha said also, 2,500 years ago, that we get all enlightened, we see these things, and we lower our defenses and connect with people. And then, a day, and it seems so easy, and seems like you're just going to be in this state of intense joy forever. And then 2 or 3 days, and that's enlightenment. And then 2 or 3 days later, you're back to your ordinary defensive self again, having slipped out of enlightenment. And then you've got to get back into enlightenment again. And that process goes on throughout your life. And I think you get better at it over time, but you never lose your capacity to fall into that black hole of self-doubt and anxiety or anger or irritability or feeling hurt or inadequate or worthless or hopeless or whatever, ashamed, whatever your thing happens to be when you're down. We never lose the capacity for that to happen to us. And all that we're doing with team therapy is just trying to develop really high-speed ways to help people pop out of that state and get back into enlightenment again.
And what an important point, because I think that that's so important for our audience to hear, is that, there's not this one set point of arrival, because I hear that so
Right.
often in my office too, that people want to so when do I finish? Not when do I finish therapy, but when do I get to kind of finish this journey? I want to feel like I've got it all together. And there really is never this point of arrival of all together. That part of being human means we're going to have those moments. Yes, we can grow in enlightenment, but we're going to fall off the wagon once in a while and be human and have a human response and a human reaction. It's not always, oh, I'm so enlightened, I'm going to respond to this perfectly. It's like, no, I got really ticked. I really got furious, or boy, I can't believe that behavior that just came out of me.
Yes, exactly. And sometimes we can get real angry and kind of be mean to people and think we're doing something really cool and something important. Then it gets pointed out to you. And you say, oh my God, was I ever screwing up? That's a shocker.
That's kind of a good segue then. Let's move into the relationship piece. Because boy, one place, I always think we can look really good to ourselves. And when we're single, boy, we can really start to convince ourselves we've got our stuff together. And then we get into relationship and wow, can we really get, we start getting this greater awareness that, oh boy, I have some triggers I wasn't aware of. Being in love, I always say, when we're in relationship, love brings up anything unlike itself for the purpose of being healed. But we get to see some of our warts and scars that maybe weren't addressed, and definitely in communication breakdown.
Yeah, relationships are very tough, and what I've noticed is that the therapists in our group, when we're teaching them the 5 secrets of effective communication, I don't know when I'm repeating myself. I've been doing so much teaching and interviews that I can't remember who I've told what to. It's kind of embarrassing, but that even professional, and I'm doing an intimacy workshop in the middle of June 15th in Mountain View for the local marriage and family therapy, California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, and I'm going to give the therapist a whole day of intimacy training using the 5 secrets. And when I'm training therapists, it takes them a lot of work to learn how to use the 5 secrets of effective communication in their professional work. But those who stick with it and really work at it can succeed. But then when it comes to doing it in their personal life with their boyfriend or girlfriend or partner or spouse or mother or brother or whoever, they really, really struggle. And we did a kind of survey of a therapy group. One of my colleagues did. I have this list I made. You see that the communication techniques we teach is EAR: empathy, assertiveness, and respect. There's 3 empathy techniques. There's an assertiveness technique and a way of conveying respect. And the techniques are absolutely mind-blowing and powerful and amazing. They work really well if you're in conflict with somebody. But it's very interesting that people don't want to use them. The resistance is the most intense of any part of psychiatry or psychology in the treatment of people with relationship conflicts. And I have a list of 12. Part of it you have to use the listening skills, the disarming technique, thought and feeling empathy, to see the world through the other person's eyes. And most people believe, wrongly and foolishly, that they can do this, but they can't. People aren't any good at it. And I have exercises that will make you very aware of your inadequacies in this field. And so we train people in how to listen more effectively. And then I have a list of 12 good reasons not to listen. And it gives all the 12 most common excuses people have given me over the years for why should I find the truth in what my husband is saying? He's wrong. That would be one of the I'm right and you're wrong type of thing. And then there's 12 good reasons not to share your feelings with I feel statements, with assertiveness statements. And people will, you teach them how to share your feelings. Well, you can share your angry feelings or you can lash out with them. That's a huge difference. But people want to lash out. They want to be passive aggressive. They want to be overtly aggressive. And I've got a list of 12 good reasons not to share your feelings, and then another 12 good reasons not to treat the other person with respect. And that's why relationship problems are so hard, is because people have two intense forms of resistance. First, they generally actually don't want to get close to the person they're fighting with. And then the second barrier is, if they did want to get close, they don't want to do what they've got to do to get close, which is to look at your own role rather than blaming the other person and trying to get the other person to change. So we did a survey of one of the online team therapy training groups. I didn't do it because I'm not in the group, but a colleague did, and asked people to make a list of all the reasons not to get close to someone they're at odds with, or all the good reasons not to use the 5 secrets of effective communication. People came up with fantastic lists. Some have been as many as 38 reasons, type of thing. It was fun to. That's maybe the podcast you were listening to on Sunday. But the resistance is very intense. So that's one thing that has to be dealt with in relationship therapy, working with people with troubled relationships. I don't know how you want to get started on this or where you want to go with it. There's a lot to say.
Let's first of all give people just a quick overview of what are the 5 secrets. If you could just give a brief description and name the 5 secrets, and then we can go into it a little bit deeper.
The 5 secrets isn't even the main kettle of fish here. People think that's what it's all about, but it's about something different, actually. It's about interpersonal enlightenment. We'll come back to that. But for what it's worth, there are 3 listening skills. 1 assertiveness or self-expression skill, and then 1 skill for conveying respect, EAR. The 3 listening skills are the disarming technique, thought and feeling, empathy, and inquiry. The assertiveness skill is called I feel statements. That's where you express your feelings with I'm feeling X, Y, and Z, and X, Y, and Z would be words from the feeling words chart. Like I'm feeling kind of down right now. I'm feeling hurt. I'm feeling a little bit picked on. I'm feeling sad, whatever. I'm feeling anxious, whatever the thing is. And Jill did such a beautiful job modeling this on the Sunday show. Well, you saw how awesome she is. And then the stroking is a kind of a crude word. I just haven't been able to come up with a better word. But stroking means to convey warmth, caring, and respect, even in the heat of battle. There's a lot of ways to do it. But it's just saying something kind. And I showed how to do this too on the Sunday show. But it's really based on the work of Martin Buber, the Jewish theologian from the early 20th century, who talked about I-it relationships and I-thou relationships. And in an I-it relationship, which is what most people are stuck in and determined to be stuck in most of the time, is where you view the person you're at odds with as an enemy or as somebody to compete, to beat, to get revenge on them, to punish them, to hurt them, to get back at them, to prove them wrong. Whereas in an I-thou relationship, you're treating the other person with reverence and awe. You're allowed to be as angry as you want, and they can be as angry as they want. But you share your anger and your other feelings in a loving or respectful way. Those are the techniques, and there's a lot to be said about how we go about teaching people these techniques. But one very important point is that those 5 techniques, when people hear them, they think, "Oh, I can do that. That's simple." But they're very difficult. There are pitfalls and errors that people make with all 5 of these techniques. In addition, there's no order that you use them in any more than there's any order of playing the keys on a piano. How do you make a beautiful music on the piano? Well, there is no answer to that. It takes a tremendous amount of practice and effort, some aptitude as well, and a lot of motivation. It's really, really tough to learn the 5 secrets, but that's really what the world's greatest communicators do when they're doing their very best communication. And we could talk about any of them, but also this outcome resistance and process resistance are massively important. And a third massively important thing is that resolving a conflict with someone you're not getting along with involves the death of the ego. It's very painful, almost always, to have to look at your own role in a problem. When we were working with Lee in this live session that Jill and I did, we kind of completed our therapy with him in 3 hours. So we can usually complete the treatment for depression and anxiety in an hour and a half or 2 hours, but relationships are a little harder. And even at that, he went awfully fast. But you see, he had contacted us, saying that he'd love to volunteer to be a patient, so we could illustrate our interpersonal model. And since he's a therapist and he's just using a personal example so we can demonstrate, a technique or how the treatment works. And we're so grateful to him. But he was saying, I think we're going to be doing couples therapy. And then we wrote back and said, we don't do couples therapy for the most part. But if you've got a problem in your relationship, we'll work with you. And that's one unique difference in the way we work with people with troubled relationships. It's the opposite of what most people do who work with a troubled marriage. I'm not saying one way is right and the other way is wrong. It's just that we find we've got just one person. It's way more effective and fast. But then he was emailing us to let us know that his wife was to blame for the problem, that she was too critical of him and always trying to control him. And that's the kind of thing I hear almost 100% of the time from someone who has a relationship problem. They're all into, it's the other person's fault, and can you help me punish that person or change that person or whatever. And when we got those emails, Jill thinks the same way I do. I said, boy, poor Lee's going to be in for a bumpy ride because he's going to because see, he was saying, well, my wife had a mother who controlled her. And so that's why she's too controlling and critical of me. See, that was his theory.
He's already, he analyzed that. So he's intellectualized the reason she's the way she is.
Yeah. And then in the therapy, we led him to the truth. The reason his wife controls him and criticizes him is because he forces her to do that every time he interacts with her. And when he saw that, he just started sobbing. It was a shock to his system. And the method we use makes it very clear to the person. It's just kind of a brutal approach. There's nothing inherently brutal about it. Just it will reveal to you exactly why you're having the problems you're having with the person that you're not getting along with. And it will always turn out to be something that you're doing that is provoking them to respond in the way that they are. And it's painful because it shatters this narcissistic notion that you have that you're this innocent victim of their badness. But it also, if you have the courage like Lee did to endure that, to look at your role, then it empowers you to turn the situation around very, very rapidly by radically changing the way you respond to that other person.
Well, and let me ask you this, David. From reading your book, Feeling Good Together, one of the things that was important, I felt like, that I took away from that book is that when you're looking at your part of it, it's also not about beating yourself up. It's right. Not, you don't want to blame the other person, and it's not about pointing the finger at yourself and then just blaming yourself, but it is looking at, what am I contributing?
Yeah.
To this situation? What am I contributing to this dynamic? And I've got to own my stuff and look at my stuff in order for this dynamic to change.
Yeah, and one reason it's so hard for people is people are not subtle in their thinking. So people think, well, it's either his fault or my fault, or it's either her fault or my fault. They don't realize that that's like the two ends of a dumbbell, with a circle and a bar connecting them. And on one side, it's it's his fault, and the other edge, it's my fault. And people go back and forth between it's his fault and it's my fault. You go into it's his fault. Well, blame is the cause of pretty much almost all relationship conflicts. Problem isn't that the other person is to blame. The problem is that you're blaming them, because every time you blame somebody, that will cause whatever you're doing to escalate. It's an absolute law of the universe. And then you go to, well, I'm no good, and that causes feelings of shame and depression and worthlessness. And that's no good either. And people vacillate back and forth. And what we're trying to teach is to rise above this. I call it the dumbbell and the egg. And up above, there's an egg that contains accountability and empathy and listening, where it's not a battle between the two, but it's difficult for people to grasp some of these things that are so massively important, but it's a subtle distinction, and a lot of people can't get it, and then a lot of other people don't want to get it because they want to blame the other person. It's very rewarding to blame other people. It makes you feel morally superior. You see this in our political system right now. On the one hand, you've got Trump and all of his followers. They're blaming all of these lefties who they've got labeled, and they're feeling massively morally superior. And they want to punish all these bad people. And then you've got all the people on the left labeling all those people on the right as some kind of retards who are following an idiot who lies and bullies and breaks the law and blames them. You see, and then that makes the people on the left feel morally superior and empowered and wanting to get revenge and wanting to get back. And these systems of blame are very, very addictive, and you've got to want intimacy more than hostility. And when you're at odds with someone, you probably won't want intimacy. You probably will prefer hostility. That's one of the reasons that it's so challenging to work with people with troubled relationships, is because we're attracted to the dark side. When you're depressed, it sucks. And if someone can show you how to get out of your depression, you'll kiss their feet and you'll feel so tremendously better. But when you've got a relationship conflict with someone, you may not want help. You may be very happy having an enemy and scapegoating that person, looking down on that person.
Well, and that's one of the, I think it's one of your resistant, I believe, tools. And I think you and Jill spoke about this in that podcast with a gentleman from Canada talking about the magic button technique. Yeah. And saying, you know,
do it right now with your listeners?
Sure.
Well, there's two forms of resistance in a relationship problem. And the first, this is a technical term. My wife said it's too technical for people, but I call it outcome resistance. What it means is you don't want a good outcome.
Okay.
So if you have a troubled relationship, a good outcome would be you learn how to make it a loving relationship. And so the first thing is to find out if someone with a troubled relationship wants help, because marital therapists assume, if you're in my office, you're telling me about your husband who you don't get along with, you must want help with your marriage, or your sister, your brother, or your wife, or whatever. But usually, nothing could be further from the truth. The first error that most relationship therapists make is thinking that people with troubled relationships want loving ones. And that's actually very rare, and I'll show you what I mean. All you people who are listening right now, see if you can think of someone that you resent, that you don't like, now or at any time in your life. And I'll actually ask you. Can you think of someone?
I can think of someone, yeah.
Yeah. Now, imagine there's a magic button. And by the way, someone just made me in our group the most gorgeous magic button and magic dial.
Oh, I love it.
From my book.
Yes.
And they're beautiful. Her husband's this graphics giant, and they look like little Rolls Royces or something. They're just, I'll have to email them to you so you can see. They're so beautiful.
Oh, wonderful.
But so you imagine, like, we've got a magic button right here. All of you people, raise your hand if you can think of someone you don't like. We'll see. Oh yes, I see all of you. All of you have your hands up. Hundreds of people, thousands maybe. So Now, imagine there's a magic button. Oh, think about that person. Think about what they do that you don't like. Like maybe they whine and complain all the time, but they ignore your advice. Maybe they won't share their feelings with you. Maybe they always argue with you and have to be right. Maybe they always have to get their way. It could be anything, but just picture them. And now imagine there's a magic button. And if you just press this magic button, that person who you so deeply resent will instantly become your greatest friend in the whole world. How many of you are going to press that magic button? Raise your hands.
My hand is down.
Yeah, yours is down. And of all the people listening, I see only 3 hands went up. 99% of the people don't want to press that magic button. And then I say, now I just gave you a choice between a hostile, abusive relationship, a troubled one, and a loving, peaceful, joyous relationship. And what did you choose?
The hostile one.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Well, yeah, and it's, for me, as I thought about this, it was because even if all of a sudden this person was being absolutely nice and so friendly, I wouldn't want to be close to him because I don't like him and I don't trust him.
Exactly. And there's no rule that says you always have to be close to someone that you don't like or that you're not getting along with. It's just that it's not common to find someone who has a troubled relationship who really does want to get close. And that's the first thing you've got to determine if you're working with someone with a troubled relationship. Do they have an agenda to develop a loving relationship, or do they just want to let you know what a pill this person is? And generally, it's the latter. Now, the next question is, suppose you did want to get close to someone you're not getting along with. What are you going to have to do that you're not going to want to do to get close? And to help answer this question, let me put it to you like this. Think about the person you're not getting along with, and then answer this question in your heart of hearts. Who do you think is the bigger jerk? Who do you think is more to blame for the problem, you or the other person?
Of course, him.
Yeah, that's whatever it is. It's the other person. And then I say, if you want to help somebody with a relationship problem,
mm-hmm.
and the person you're trying to help is blaming the other person, what is the prognosis that you can help them? The likelihood that they can develop a loving relationship?
I'm going to say closer to 0.
It's not close to 0.
It is 0. Yeah, it is 0.
No techniques in the world literature that are powerful enough to help somebody who's blaming others for the problems in their relationships. And you see that in marriage, you see it in gay relationships, you see it in father-son relationships, sadly. You see it between Republicans and Democrats, or Trumpites and anti-Trumpites. You see it in international conflicts like Israeli-Palestine. Everyone's seeing it as the other person's fault. No one wants to look at their own role, and most of the time they don't even want to be close. You see, if you ask the Israeli, do you want to have really loving relationships with Arabs, with people in Palestine? What are they going to say?
Yeah, no.
Some of them will, but an awful lot of them won't. The head of Israel, I would say no. And then you talk to the Palestinians and say, would you like to have really loving relationships with the Jewish people? And a lot of them are going to say no. That, I think, is why there's so much suffering in the world, and there has been for thousands of years, is because of this outcome resistance and process resistance. And if you're the outcome resistance is, I don't want to get close to this person, and the process resistance is, I don't want to have to do the process necessary to get close. I don't want to have to look at my own role and change myself.
Yeah, I don't want to do that inner work. It's so much easier to just point my finger and blame. Yeah. And I'm really hearing that really clearly. That's very powerful, because it's not just an individual scale. It really is a world scale, that as long as we're pointing the finger and blaming, we will never resolve the conflict. Yeah.
I don't mean to be pessimistic, but my wife and I, she's the brains in our family, and we really question if the human race will be able to survive because of this exact issue. that there is so much of the dark side in human beings, and as our weapons become more powerful and our global warming becomes more severe, we may end up extinct, wiping ourselves out because of our hatred. And for my wife and myself, I mean, this is going to sound awful to say this. Our sadness about this is not for the loss of human life, but for the loss of animal life. That when we go, we're going to be taking so many innocent animals with us who didn't do anything to deserve a nuclear holocaust or dying as a result of global warming or other self-destructive things that humans have in them. And I hope we can solve these problems, but it's very tough, even in therapy, working with someone who's very angry and very blaming toward others. It's not easy, and if you don't deal with these two motivational / resistance issues first, this outcome resistance and this process resistance, your hope of helping someone is very minimal.
I personally too feel like, so the hope for our world is that we have to start within ourselves and do our own work as much as we can, and as we heal ourselves, then we're able to hopefully do that in relationship and with the people that we're directly involved with, and then that's kind of what radiates out.
And that sounds great to say that, but there's very few people doing that.
Well, and that's what we have to. Yeah, I hear you, and my optimism is that I can't change the world, but I'm willing to do my own work.
Yes,
and so that's hopefully
with others who are willing to do their own work, and what a fabulous experience that is.
And I think that is the privilege that you and I get to be witness to, is the people that show up in our offices and the people that show up at that training group. To me, that is the hope. People that are willing to show up and that are willing to do their work. And so little by little, I mean, I guess I'm much more of an optimist. I think that we're in the age of enlightenment. If we get into a whole, existential talk about this, but that there is a tipping point. And sometimes these things, as you know, happen in polarities, and then the pendulum swings.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we're really brought to this very dark place before the pendulum can swing back, because we have
That's the hope. That's the great hope.
Yes.
And there is that tendency for pendulums to swing back and forth. Absolutely. Well, I hope you're right. But in the meanwhile, I have my little cat, Miss Misty, and I've got you to hang out with and talk to and have fun with, and the people in the Tuesday group and the Sunday hikes and the people who open their hearts and ask for help. And gosh, that's a fantastic, fabulous thing to be involved with.
It is. That's the blessing. And so, David, as you're talking about helping couples or helping individuals, after you deal with their resistance, and you've worked at kind of resolving some of this, outcome resistance, and help them to say, okay, I'm willing to look within myself. Yeah. What's the next step?
Well, the next step is I've developed this form called the Relationship Journal, and I think in the book Feeling Good Together, which if anyone listening to the podcast wants to learn more about that's my book to get, Feeling Good Together. You can get it on Amazon, and it's a little mass market paperback. And I think in that book, I gave it that name. I don't recall. I think I called it the Relationship Journal, but it's been modified since the book. It's become very powerful. And it's based on the idea that to help you solve this relationship problem and all of your relationship problems, I call it fractile psychotherapy. All I need is one tiny moment that when you weren't getting along with somebody, and all I need to know is, what did they say to you, and what did you say next? And in the Relationship Journal, you have to write it down. What is one exact thing that this person you're not getting along to said to you, and then what exactly did you say next? The new Relationship Journal, which I think you haven't seen, also has underneath, where you put what the other person said to you, has all this list of, my emotions list. There's about 9 kinds of feelings with synonyms like depressed, sad, unhappy, down, anxious, panic, worried, and you circle all the emotions you think the other person was having when they said that to you. And then you put what you said next and how you were feeling. Maybe you were feeling put down or sad or ashamed or angry or guilty or inadequate or whatever. You circle all of your feelings. That small exchange is all you need to achieve interpersonal enlightenment. But it's going to be a pretty brutal experience for you. I give you want an example of how this works?
Yes.
I gave a workshop in Sacramento years ago. A hospital asked me to do a workshop for clinicians and then a half day the next day for the general public. And so they wanted something on troubled relationships, and they had about 300 people in a high school gymnasium for my presentation. And I asked them, who is the difficult person in your life? And what did they say to you? And what did you say next? And I had them fill this out. It took about 3 or 4 minutes. And I said, would anyone care to tell us who is the difficult person in your life? And this woman in the front row, she was waving her hand, and she was all eager for me to call on her. And I haven't told you this already, right?
No.
Okay, that's good. And so I called on her, and she said, I came to this workshop because my husband has been criticizing me all day, every year for the last 35 years. And I came to the workshop to find out, why are men like that? I said to her, well, scientists don't yet know why men are the way they are or why women are the way they are. But if you can tell me what you wrote down, what is one thing your husband said to you and what exactly did you say next? Maybe we can understand, what's going on in your marriage. We'll start understanding, at this very, very small level. And so I said, what's one thing that your husband said to you, and how did you respond? Something that was, upsetting to you. And she said, well, just last night, he said to me, you never listen. So she had written that down, you never listen. And then I said, and now what did you put down? What did you say to him next? And she said, oh, I said nothing. I just ignored him.
That's perfect.
When she said that, the whole audience broke out laughing. She didn't know what they were laughing about. She couldn't see what was fairly obvious.
Oh, that is so good.
Now, isn't it? And then, but it's always some version of that. This is just a real obvious one, but this same phenomenon, it will always be going down. Will always be happening if you use the relationship journal. What did you write down? What did the other person say to me? What did you say next? The live session with Lee was very similar, very powerful example of this. Then in step 3 in the relationship journal, you say, you're agreed to look at your role, not to just be blaming the other person. So let's look at what you said. And there's 3 criteria. Was this good or bad communication? In good communication, you acknowledge the other person's feelings and find some truth in what they're saying. That's the empathy, assertiveness, respect, EAR. That's the empathy.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
The assertiveness piece, did I share my feelings openly and directly and with respect? And then the last piece, the respect, the stroking, did I convey warmth, caring, love, respect? That's good communication. And then it's a checkbox for each of these 3. And then the EAR, the bad communication, is for empathy, you don't acknowledge the other person's feelings. You ignore their feelings. And instead of finding truth in what they said, you argue with them and imply that they're wrong about something. On the assertiveness, instead of sharing your feelings, you act them out in a passive-aggressive or openly aggressive way. You argue. You you show your hostility rather than sharing your feelings. You don't mention any of your emotions. There's no vulnerability at all. The bad communication on the assertiveness piece, and then on respect, convey warmth or caring. You convey hostility, competitiveness, and so it's a no-brainer on this woman. She didn't acknowledge, and that's why we have people now circle the feelings so they can't wriggle out of it in step 3. And I've never seen anyone who acknowledged someone else's feelings. There's this thing that women deal with feelings and men deal with trucks. Gray thing. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
Right.
It's a total scam. There are no women in the United States who can deal with feelings. I've never seen one.
Interesting.
Look at the relationship journal. I've looked at least 5,000 relationship journals, 2/3 from women, and never once has a woman, even a mental health professional on that, acknowledged the other person's feelings or shared your own feelings. And never are people conveying respect. Now, this woman at the workshop, and this is a very threatening form for people, because people always find out that you had bad communication. You did everything badly, poorly. And this woman was coming to the workshop to find out, why is my husband the way he is? She's pointing the finger at blame at him. All of a sudden, the finger of blame is rotating 180 degrees and pointing directly at her. And when you're doing therapy, then you have to see, will the person freak out or not? Because at this point, some people say, I don't want this kind of therapy. I'm done. It's my husband's fault, and this is a lot of garbage. If the person can endure that step 3, like Lee, burst into tears when he suddenly saw how bad his response to his wife had been. She had said something to him about not raising his voice so much with their little baby daughter, and then he got all defensive and started arguing with her. He hadn't acknowledged her feelings. He hadn't shared his own feelings, and he definitely conveyed no warmth or caring. And then in step 4, it's the most explosive part of the relationship journal. Like, what will the impact be of how you responded to the other person? What will, take the woman from Sacramento, what is your husband going to think and feel when you respond to him by ignoring him? And then what will he do next? See, he said, you never listen, and then she ignored him. It's really telling him, you're not even worth the air coming out of my mouth. She is not conveying warmth. She's not acknowledging any truth in what he's saying. She's not sharing any of her feelings. She's got all of these feelings. Then what will he conclude when she responds to him like this?
Well, she's reinforcing what he just said tenfold.
Yeah.
You don't listen to me and I don't matter.
Exactly. So then what will he do next?
Move away, I imagine. Emotionally pull away.
He'll emotionally pull away. He did that 35 years ago, I suspect. But will his criticism increase or decrease?
Will increase, because it's just been proven.
Yeah. You see, because she's proving that she doesn't listen. And so he'll keep criticizing her. So she came to find out, why are men like that? And now she knows the answer. Because you're forcing your husband to be like that. Now, does she want to hear that? For 35 years, she's been telling herself that it's her husband's fault. Suddenly, she finds out she is the total cause of this problem. Now, before your listeners throw tomatoes at me and say I'm a male chauvinist or something, I have to get across the concept of interpersonal relativity.
Okay. Now, that's a fancy term as well, probably for a lot of listeners.
Well, I use fancy terms to make people think I'm intelligent when I'm not.
Good job.
Psychology functions, I think. You take a little common sense concept and you add a fancy word to it. I think you're real smart.
I think you're a big deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that whoever comes to me will discover they're entirely causing the problem. See, if her husband had come to the workshop instead of her, and he had done a relationship journal, he would have come to the same shocking discovery that whatever it is that he's causing his wife to ignore him, et cetera. But whoever comes and asks for help, you will discover that you're causing that very problem, and it's incredibly painful. And when I do this for myself, I hate it because I'm just so sure it's the other person's fault, and it's so painful for me to see how I cause problems. Sometimes, for example, I get annoyed with my students because they seem to have such thin skin, and they start thinking, if you criticize their technique on a role play, then you're telling them you think they're a worthless person or a terrible therapist. And I'm thinking, well, I don't think that about you. I'm just focusing on your specific errors that you made. So stop reacting so irrationally. This is your fault. Do you see? That's how I think.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
You see what I mean?
Yep.
And then I have to look at my own role and say, well, maybe you need David to be more patient, and you're an authority figure, and they wrongly think you're important. They wrongly think you know something, so they're intimidated by you. And maybe you need to be more warm and gentle in your teaching. And then I have to look at my own role, and it's kind of painful because I can see a lot of times when I'm too gruff with people or too direct, too insensitive, something like that. But it's painful to. The step 4, it's the death of the ego, but at the same time, it's a tool for interpersonal enlightenment because you see that you're creating your own interpersonal reality at every moment of every day. See, that's the Buddhist concept. It's also a Christian concept. It's woven into just about every religion, using various symbols, various language, various ways of expressing this idea. But the Buddhism is we're creating our own interpersonal reality, and it's very liberating if you're willing to see it, because it means we have more power than we think. And so if we are willing to change the way we relate to the people we're not getting along with, using the 5 secrets of effective communication, we can transform a troubled relationship. It's not a 100% thing, but I would say it's a 90% successful thing if you do it skillfully and with humility. So then the last part of the relationship journal is using the 5 secrets to respond differently. The disarming technique, thought and feeling, empathy. So if he's saying to her, "You never listen," how might she respond more skillfully?
Well, if she was using the disarming technique, or do you want me to?
Any of them.
Empathy.
You use several of them.
Yeah. Well, she might say, "Wow, honey, if you really feel that way, I can imagine if you felt like I wasn't listening, that would feel really painful to you."
Right. Now, you didn't use the disarming technique.
No, I used empathy. You said I could move around. So, but disarming is finding some truth in what the other person is saying. And so she might say, Can
we just highlight your error before we go on?
Yes.
and again, I'm not trying to put you down. I have to think the world of you. But you said if you felt I was critical of you, I can imagine you'd be pretty upset.
Mm-hmm.
But
true empathy would be when I'm not listening to you, it hurts your feelings.
Yes. Now I'm giving you an A+.
Okay.
Do you see? And you could then add to that, and you're right. It just dawned on me. I've been kind of ignoring you for the past 35 years and blaming you all the while.
And so that's the disarming, when you actually say, you're right. That's true. I tune you out. That's one of the things I do is I tune you out, and I imagine that feels like crap.
It's painful for me too. I just saw this about myself for the first time, and I can imagine you've been feeling lonely and angry with me and frustrated. I just love you so much, and it's just crushing to me to suddenly realize what I've been doing to you for the last 35 years. And tell me more what that's been like for you. I'm ready to listen now, and I'm speechless. Tell me what's going on. I want to hear. How was that?
That was good. I mean, you were incorporating some of the I feel statements and the inquiry, stroking. Yeah. And the thing that's interesting then, that what I was thinking about, David, as you were saying that, is in your experience then, is the other person, like the husband's response, like he's blown away, or can he even receive that at that point?
Well, it all depends on how skillfully you do it. I don't know what grade my response just got. If you're not up to an A or A plus, you can keep practicing it and revising it until you get really, really good. But if you disarm the other person, they're generally pretty speechless. And it's why I'm glad you made that small empathy error, just saying if you felt I was being critical, I can imagine you're upset. Well, the problem with that is if you felt that way, implies you're wrong. Do you see? It's not addressing the truth of it, and that's why the disarming piece is so important to say you're absolutely right.
Right. It's not just if you felt that way. You're actually stating it as a fact. So you're saying and you're right.
And you have to be willing to see the truth in what they're saying, and a lot of most people are not. But it's also based on what I call the law of opposites, which is if you agree with a criticism, if you defend yourself from a criticism that seems unfair, you'll prove that it's valid. That's a paradox.
Now say that again.
If you defend yourself against an untrue criticism, you'll prove it's true.
Right.
And the other side of the paradox is that if, in contrast, you immediately and genuinely agree that a fake, exaggerated, false criticism is actually a true one, the moment you agree with it, it won't be true anymore, and the other person will see that. Let's just demonstrate that. Say to me, you never listen.
Yeah, you never listen to me, David.
I'm listening to you at this very moment, sweetheart.
I don't know how to argue with that.
Right, but you see, I'm defending myself, which proves that you're right. Mm-hmm. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. Because I'm not listening now. I'm just arguing and talking about myself.
Yeah, I'm listening now. Yeah.
So
right.
We'll tick the other person off. That's the law of opposites. Now, this time I'll agree with you. Go ahead and say it again.
So, David, I feel like you never listen to me.
It's painful to hear what you're saying because I hate to admit it, but you're right. I haven't been listening. I've been arguing with you and putting you down, and I can imagine you're so hurt and so angry with me. Tell me more what that's been like. You've probably been feeling frustrated, lonely too. I've been feeling kind of lonely too. Tell me what it's been like for you when I don't listen.
See, that's an A plus. That just feels so different. So 180. Yeah.
And see, it's a paradox that when you agree that the criticism is true, the person stops believing it. Do you see, by agreeing that I don't listen, I prove that I'm listening.
Right. I mean, that's what's beautiful about this. All of a sudden, like you were talking about, you get to that point, and all of a sudden the door is just wide open. Yeah.
But it requires the death of the ego.
Yes.
And when you die, you're immediately reborn. That's the spiritual concept behind it. And the other person will be reborn too. When your defenses go down, the other person's defenses will go down. You'll kind of go to heaven together. It's a spiritual phenomenon as much as it is a psychological technique. If you use it as a gimmick or as a technique, it won't be effective. It has to come from the heart, and you have to really be willing to see that the other person is right. And most people, sadly, don't want to see that.
Well, that's difficult. That's difficult.
Yeah, it hurts.
It does. And to get behind someone else's eyes and to get that, just what you're saying, that there's truth in what they are saying, even if it's not how you're looking at the situation through your lens.
Yeah.
There's truth in how this person's feeling and why they're behaving this way or why they're saying this.
Yes. And it's not just the way they're feeling. What they're saying is true and ultimate reality.
Right. Even if it's not your reality, it's theirs. So you were acknowledging.
Well, it's ultimate reality. That's what I'm saying. It's not a relative thing.
Help me understand that piece. So it's ultimate reality in that.
Well, we can give many, many examples, but to state the one we just had, let's say you said to me, David, you're not listening. that's true in ultimate reality. What you're telling me was true.
Oh, I hear what you're saying. So, yes, you weren't listening, and I'm acknowledging it, but it's painful to admit it. For you, yes. Even if you didn't want to maybe believe that, the truth is it really is happening.
Yes.
I hear you.
Something real that's happening in reality. That's the point. This is not a tricky thing or a relative thing, or I can see how you feel that way. Like that would be a crappy response. But it's really true, and you have to be willing and able to see that it's really true. So, for example, suppose that a patient says to a therapist, "You don't care about me." The therapist is likely to say, "Oh, but I do care about you." Mm-hmm. What will the patient conclude?
You really don't care about me.
Exactly. You saw that.
Yeah.
Now, if a patient says to a therapist, "You don't care about me," is that true in the patient's reality or in ultimate reality?
Well, now I get what you're saying, because it's ultimate reality. Even if my intention was not to be uncaring, there was something that I said or didn't say or didn't do that came across as I don't care.
Yes, and how do you feel about patients who attack you and say, "Oh, you don't care about me"? What's the name of your emotion? Option A is great joy and love, and option B is frustrated and pissed off.
Right. And so if we're truly wanting to help people heal, we can say, wow, help me understand what it was that I did or didn't do or said that caused that feeling in you.
Yes, that's good inquiry, but it's not disarming.
Well, disarming is saying, right, I get the disarming. So you say, yes, I have been uncaring in some way, and you are feeling uncared about, and I want to know more about it. Is that right?
It's pretty clumsy.
I'm missing.
Move it in the right direction.
Let me try. It's hard for me to really get to it. Yeah.
And I want people to see that it's really hard, but it would be, you're right. And it's painful for me too. I think we're doing pretty good up to a couple sessions ago. You were giving me perfect scores on the empathy and helpfulness scale. And I was feeling so close to you. In the last couple sessions, feels like we've been in battle. And I think you've been ticked off at me, and I've been feeling kind of frustrated too. And I've done a terrible job of providing the warmth and caring that you feel, that you want, and that you need. And you told me that every person you ever loved has rejected you or hurt you, starting with your father. And now I'm the one in that role.
And I'm rejecting you too.
Yes, I'm rejecting you too. And it's so awful for me to have to look at that. And I can imagine how hurt you must be feeling, how angry and how lonely and rejected. And as ashamed and awkward as this is, I'm excited, because this can be our chance to slay that dragon and to develop the kind of relationship that you want and that I want. And with that in mind, tell me what this has been like for you. How's that?
Great. I mean, that's an A. And I, as you're saying that, it was so interesting, because as I was, going into that role play with you, my throat felt so tight.
Yeah.
Because it's not natural for me yet.
Yeah. It's not natural for anybody.
To try to learn how to do that, to truly just drop the ego completely.
Yeah. Yeah. To see the truth and what the other person is saying. The disarming technique was, although I created it, I guess, arguably, I created the 5 secrets. Other people have proposed similar things for probably thousands of years, but it was the hardest one for me to learn because I'm very argumentative by my nature. And so I really worked at it because initially I had trouble seeing the truth in what patients were saying. I was kind of like where you're at right now, but even not as good as you are right now. And I kept telling myself that this is untrue, what they're saying. They say I'm a hopeless case, and I would say, no, that's wrong. You're not hopeless. All my patients wrongly believe that, and I will save you. And then they would get pissed off. And I say, why did they get pissed off? I just told them I would cure them, and they don't like it. Well, I wasn't finding the truth in what they were saying. So when I went home from work, I went from the 30th Street train station to the Bryn Mawr station, and then I would jog home about 3 miles from the Bryn Mawr train station. I had about 12 to 20 minutes on the train, depending on how many stops it made, and I would write down things that patients said to me that I thought I couldn't agree with. And then I would work at it until I would find a way to agree with it. And I did this for at least 30 minutes a day for 2 solid months. And even when I was jogging, I would say, now suppose a patient said this, how would I agree with it? And I did that until there was nothing left that I couldn't agree with it, and I got really good at it. But I started from a 0 point, and then eventually it became kind of like second nature. Let's do an exercise. Go ahead and let's see if David can disarm anything. Give me some kind of outrageous criticism that couldn't possibly be true, and I'll immediately agree with you.
Okay. Well, it's evident to me, David, that you really don't give a crap about any of your patients, and that, really this is all about you, and that you really don't care about other people.
Yeah, it's painful to hear you say that, because I just have to agree with you. I just think that compassion is absolutely important, and I'm just fearful that a lot of times I'm just interested in proving my techniques right and kind of impressing people, and thinking how clever I'm being to get a rapid response. And it just breaks my heart sometimes to have to look at that part of myself that is so frequently lacking in compassion. And you're saying that you know me, and maybe you've seen some things you can tell me that would be hard for me to look at and to listen to, but I'm ready to do that.
That's so powerful. And of course, I'm saying that's not true, but I literally feel myself having an emotional response to you, even though this is, this hypothetical untrue. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's powerful. So, my question,
Try
David, for you.
something more outrageous, because that was too easy. Just say,
really?
David, isn't it true that you're a total fraud and a totally worthless human being?
Whoa.
How about something more like that?
Whoa.
And I'll agree with you.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Let me see. So I'm not doing exactly what you just said.
Just do something outrageous and impossible.
Isn't it true that all you care about is making money, and that truly people don't matter? All that matters is you and your ego. That's really what you're interested in feeding?
I think so, yeah. And it's horrible to look at that side of myself, but I just love making money. It really turns me on. I wish I could make $1 billion. I'm thinking of making a little app, a feeling good app. I'm hoping it'll make billions and make kind of like Bill Gates or something like that. And absolutely, what a battle between the compassionate side that wants to give and the greedy side that wants to build yourself up and exploit other people. And I just have to plead, guilty as charged.
Wow. I mean, talk about diffusing whatever the situation would be. It's hard as the other person holding on to any, I know this is so untrue, but it's really hard then to hold on to any sense of being ticked off or angry with you once you're owning it. And so as I'm experiencing this right now myself, as you and I are kind of doing some of these role plays and have this awareness of how difficult this death of ego for any of us is.
That's why it's called the death of the ego.
Oh, it's rough. And I guess what I'm curious about is, so teaching couples to do this.
Well, I would never try to teach couples.
Not couples, but excuse me, an individual.
I try to climb Mount Everest at my old age.
So when you teach an individual, when you teach an individual to do this, what is your experience, and how long does it take someone to learn these techniques?
It depends a lot on your personal relationship with the patient. And if they really like you and really trust you, if you've got an A+ on empathy, you've got a shot at it. And Lee learned it on a Saturday morning in 3 hours, and a good hour and a half of that he was just venting. The way people go to therapy and vent for months, really, or years, just about childhood and my father wasn't there, and all these themes that people get into, and if you stay there, it'll go on and endlessly. But we moved them into the paradoxical agenda setting, did the invitation step. And then found out that there was something he wanted help with, worked through his resistance, and then we went through the relationship journal. It can happen rapidly if the patient really likes you and trusts you, And if they have an agenda that they want help, but if they can't overcome their outcome resistance, in other words, if they're just like, I'm thinking of somebody right now that I really like you. I don't want to get close to the guy, and I could use my 5 secrets, but I don't trust him, and I think it'd be foolish to trust him. And then secondly, are you willing to pay the price of the death of your ego and looking at your own role? And if a person is willing to do that, then they can move pretty quickly. But I would say, I think Jill and I both estimate that of the people who talk to us about a relationship problem, at least 3/4 of them really will not be asking for help.
So 3/4 of the people don't want help.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm hearing that.
It's
okay.
music to my ears when I heard her say that, because I think, well, if she's having that experience, that I am too.
Yes. But the 1/4 that does want help.
You can do it quickly. I mean, you can transform a troubled relationship that's been troubled for 20 years. You can do it in 90 seconds using the 5 secrets.
And that's powerful. And then is your information then that change lasts?
Everything in the universe is constantly changing, right?
Definitely.
And so would it be fair to say that nothing lasts?
Well, yes. I hear what you're saying.
So would it be fair to say we're going to be drifting in and out of enlightenment?
For sure.
So that person will have a return of this ornery, angry, blaming side. And then they have the question, do I want to pick up these tools and use them?
Again, yes.
Yeah, and then the decision has to be made. With depression and anxiety, once a person has recovered, I tell them, you're going to relapse about once a day. Is that okay? And I can show you how to pop out of it really, really fast. And people have done well. I may have said this in the previous podcast. So I've had at least 40,000 therapy sessions with people with very severe depression and anxiety. And after they recovered, I did relapse prevention training, which takes about 30 minutes. It doesn't take long. And then I've had maybe 8 or 10 that ever came back for a relapse. I told all of them, come back whenever you relapse if you can't handle it on your own. But I taught them how to handle it. And the prognosis there is, very, very good for the long term. In my experience, I haven't had patients who got, for the most part, who just got stuck for years and years in depression. But they knew that they'd have 5 happy days every week and 2 miserable days every week. But I don't have good data on the relapse with relationship problems.
Okay.
The resistance is so intense there, and it's so attractive to get back into that blaming pattern.
Well, and I don't know if I shared with you the whole entire reason I had already read You're Feeling Good, but the whole reason that I think I'd already read When Panic Attacks, but the whole reason that I read You're Feeling Good together, I really have a personal connection to this. Just like all relationships, my brother and his wife, having 2 kids, 2 very busy careers, had kind of come at odds at times with each other. And, not that they were ever mean to each other or anything like that, but when we were all together, you could just tell there was some tension.
Between who and who?
Between my brother and my sister-in-law.
Oh, your brother. Oh, okay. Between them. They're married.
Yes, between them. They're married. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we would just see each other a few times a year at holidays. And then this has been several years ago now. All of a sudden there was this holiday and we're all together and they're laughing together and they were holding hands and smooching every once in a while. And you could just see this warmth between them again.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I had asked my sister-in-law, I said, what has happened? What's going on? And she said, we read this book, Feeling Good Together.
Oh, wow.
I'm not kidding.
Giving you an A+ on this interview. You are the world's greatest interviewer.
But the powerful moment was exactly when she acknowledged, she said, because it had been easy to look at what my brother was doing. And I think that's what we all naturally do in relationships. It's like, what's that person doing to me? And that shift of looking at just not blaming myself and cutting myself down, but what am I contributing?
Yeah.
Changed the dynamic in their relationship. And
it has been wonderful
to see, how that they've continued just to have really just this neat dynamic relationship where you see the closeness between them.
Wow.
So they really utilized the tools and the techniques. And so, that's why I was sold on.
It's the greatest thing in the world. I mean, the reward of intimacy is just fantastic, and that's why I so much love my Tuesday group and the Sunday hikes. When we go on the Sunday hikes, people open up. If there's problems between the two of us, we talk about it and disarm, and it's just people that you can be with and be real and feel close to, and it's beautiful riches to have. But it is the war of the worlds between. There's the rewards of intimacy. I say once your ego is dead, it's pretty good because you can join the Grateful Dead.
That's true.
But the rewards of battle are excitement. It's more like probably a cocaine high. I've never had cocaine, but it's like a rush, and you feel powerful and get behind all that revenge energy, and that's pretty great too. You know that Robert Frost poem? I went to Amherst College, and he was still alive. He would come once a year and read his poetry, and it was very exciting. But he had that poem, Fire and Ice. Some say the world will end in fire. Some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and will suffice. Isn't that's a cool one?
That is cool.
But there's just so much hostility in the world that's fighting the forces of love. I mean, it sounds like a comic book. It sounds corny, but I believe there are these two forces inside of us, the force that wants to love, to be close, to enjoy being close, and the side that wants to get revenge. And it's not going to be a slam dunk one way or the other, I'm afraid.
Well, and that's the inner work, right? That we continue to work towards how we can choose love, how we can move towards love, and acknowledge when that darker side in all of us that exists comes up and rears its ugly head.
Yeah.
And I really do believe that it's through practice that, and like you're saying, I mean, I think the more that we practice something like the 5 secrets, we start learning that we actually do have some control maybe that we didn't think that we had.
Oh, absolutely. You discover things that you were blind to when you were resisting. It's all different from what you thought was going to happen, but it takes a lot of practice. It's like learning to play a musical instrument and using the 5 secrets skillfully. It's a high art form, and it is very, very rewarding. Well, I've loved this interview with you, and boy, we took a long time here.
We did, and that's okay. I appreciate your time always so much, and I'm hoping that we can connect again in the future. I would just be sad to think this is our last interview or the last time we get to connect.
Well, see how your audience responds, and if they want more French fries or something, or another Burns cheeseburger or whatever. Here, I'm sure we can think up another title, because there's just so many exciting things to talk about, and it's just wonderful to explore these topics with you because of your enthusiasm, your skill, your knowledge, and you're just a fabulous person to talk to.
And that was the 3rd installment of your interviews with Stephanie James. That was concluded with brio, I must say. So I want to remind again our listeners that if they want to support us, please leave us some comments and questions on your website, feelinggood.com. Please leave us, if you like our podcast, a 5-star review on Apple iTunes. Forward this to your friends and family, and post on your own blog and your own podcast.
And we've got a lot of fabulous Ask David questions coming up, among which, how do you communicate with loved ones in an era of the two sides, and how hostile people get toward each other, and what that happens in your family? What should you do? I think this is an issue that will touch many, many of our listeners. There are the two divisions right now in our country, and if you're a pro-Trumper and you have an anti-Trump relative, you're going to argue, and if you're an anti-Trumper and you got a pro-Trump relative, it's going to be a conflict.
It's true that the political divide, I think the rift hasn't been bigger than it is now.
Yeah, since the Civil War.
Is really also manifesting within families.
Yeah, absolutely. And then how do you communicate with loved ones when there's all this political tension in the air? And that's what we're going to draw. It's not by who's right or wrong in this political conflict, but how do you connect with your mother, with your brother?
All right, fantastic. Thank you, David. This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes for this podcast under the blog page, and where you can leave your comments and questions. The website has an abundance of resources for therapists as well as non-therapists, including books, workshops, a list of online training groups around the world, and much more. Theme music is Gypsy Jazz in Paris, 1935, composed and performed by Brett Van Donsel. I am your host, Fabrice and I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.